Why did Suicide Squad fail? It seems like a fairly simple question to answer, considering the lack of depth from the film, but the film is in the middle spot, right between films that have concise, clear, deep characters, and films that are basically just action movies and lack any character development at all. There are a couple of very specific issues with Suicide Squad. All of them are sourced from the writing. There are three main principles to which all of writing, regardless of plot or writing style, have to stick to. The first is audience engagement. That is, your audience needs to be pulled in and attracted to what's going on. They need to be able to feel a connection to the characters. This is how writers establish what emotions we should feel towards certain characters. For example, we generally feel very negative or otherwise aggressive emotions towards the main antagonist. The second essential ingredient is a protagonistic center. We need to have somebody in the story who has a goal, something they're trying to achieve at every point in the story. In some writing, the characters' goals are going to be changed throughout the story, sometimes for better or worse. But regardless of how good your plot is, your protagonist still needs to have a suitable goal that they're trying to achieve, and otherwise, we don't really have anything that we're trying to do, and it's really just our character walking around doing random things that pertain nothing to the original story. The third principle is a proper beginning and end. Before you even begin writing, you need to have drafted out and narrowed down to hopefully no more than a couple of ideas for how you want your story to begin and end. There are literally millions of choices for what emotions you want the audience to feel at the beginning and end, but you must perform it properly or you end up with characters lacking depth. The Hunger Games, The Dark Knight, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings, The Maze Runner, and Star Wars. These are all examples of high-grossing films that adhere to these three simple principles. The primary issue with Suicide Squad is that we don't really have a central protagonist. We simply get a bunch of brief backstories as opposed to just getting to know a single character really well and understand their motivation before we just dive into all of the action. Action is the side dish, the condiment, the seasoning, not the main dish. So first, we think our protagonist is going to be Deadshot. Now, I think Deadshot would be an excellent choice for a protagonist, but then we transition to Harley Quinn and so on and so on. There's nothing wrong with introducing characters, but those first 20 to 25 minutes are absolutely key to introducing our protagonist. Here's how you would do a Deadshot-based film. Show us a 15-minute scene that's like a day with his daughter. He drops her off at school, and then it cuts to that assassination scene, which is kind of like his life without his kid, the darker side of him. Then it cuts to that afternoon where he picks his daughter up, they go shopping and have dinner, and then the Batman scene where Deadshot is arrested or whatever. Then the film has a brief, not extended scene telling us about the origins of all of the other characters, and that's your setup. There you go. And of course, while Deadshot is having dinner with his daughter and going shopping with her, they're having dialogue that will increase the pathos, the emotional appeal of the plot. That would be an excellent movie that's worth my $10. I came up with that in 5 minutes. That right there is a plot worth Will Smith's acting. I've told you one of like half a dozen perspectives from which to write this movie, but I think Deadshot works best because first of all it's Will Smith, and then there's also the emotional appeal of his daughter that we can all connect to. Now, they kind of try to focus on Harley Quinn by putting in the Joker and trying to establish character connections between the two of them, but it doesn't really work out well because it seems last minute and not well put together. These really are quote-unquote protagonists because we never fully establish that these are the good guys, so it's really just kind of confusing. I mean, in reality, I'm still clueless as to if these guys are good or bad. That being said, we are pushed in the direction of liking the Suicide Squad, but there's never really a definitive answer to who's good and bad, and this is a major issue. You should have a really big difference between your protagonist and antagonist, and sometimes those can be the closest things, but they still have to have some kind of significant difference in some way, shape, or form. For example, the Joker and Batman both represent opposite sides of society. They both represent something within the same category, but they represent completely opposite sides. The Joker represents chaos, while Batman, meanwhile, represents order. So if you want us to feel emotions, the first thing you've got to do is actually make us like and connect to a couple of the characters, because otherwise it just becomes a mess of confusion where we don't really give one about any of the characters. I want to briefly discuss Harley Quinn. Her problem is this: she's over-sexualized, and it's that simple. There's literally a scene of her wearing a bikini as she gets dressed, and this accomplishes nothing. And worse, if it's supposed to, like, appeal to people because she's cute or whatever, she's also kind of villainous, so it's extremely confusing what we're, like, trying to go for, because the filmmakers apparently couldn't frickin' decide if she's, like, supposed to be one thing or the other. But it gets worse. Suicide Squad has an awful beginning and end, and I mean just, like, terrible. The first and last 25 minutes of your film are always the most important. During the first, as I've already said, your character is going to make connections to the audience. We establish and outline who's good, who's supporting the protagonist, and who's the bad guys. Now, all of this being said, neither the protagonist nor the villain have to be the first character we see, as with Star Wars, but we still need to spend the majority of the first act of the film with the protagonist and their supporting character. With Suicide Squad, we just spend a little bit of time with everybody, and we never get an outline of who's good and bad. We also never get really a clear objective, which is the second sub-ingredient of a proper beginning and end that you really need to establish. In a proper beginning, you need to establish goals to complete. We don't have a clear idea of what our characters are doing, though, because we never really established a goal. First, they want to get out of their cells in prison, and they, like, get a little time off their prison sentence. Okay, it's not really a relatable goal, but, like, you can go for that. But once they've accomplished this, there aren't really any other goals. The characters are just kind of dragged along at this point, and the consequences that we feel like we're being dragged along as the audience too. Now our protagonists couldn't care less, and in order for a character to be well set up, they have to have the motivation to actually do the right thing, or whatever they're supposed to be doing. For Katniss Everdeen, for example, it was very simple. You will be killed if you don't kill others. This related to the audience because it's her motivation to live, her survival instincts, something that we all have. This setup is interesting because our protagonist had to make difficult choices, but if your character doesn't have any issue with making choices, it's just kind of dragging along with the storyline because your characters are just like, okay, I'm doing this, whatever, big deal. Like in Suicide Squad, the setup at this point feels needless because that's what it is. Our characters couldn't care less about their mission, so we end up with a couple of emotional fragments in our story, but no other thing than this. So we're pretty much dragged through the film. Not only this, but I was not once on the edge of my seat. Nothing about it is engaging or shocking. Our characters are kind of overpowered, which I guess is like the point of the film, but if you're never having like any concern for your characters, it's not entertaining to watch. Only once did I actually feel remorse for any of the characters, which was Deadshot and his daughter. And only once did I feel a pull towards the character, Deadshot, again, but still barely any. I had almost no relatability, just nothing. So, to summarize, this film has no protagonistic center, it has no clear direction for who to root for, we don't have any fragments of motivation, and thus our characters are as clueless and dragged through this shit as we are, and we have no reason to believe that this film started properly, or gave us a satisfying ending, because it's not in a series and has no business with a terrible ending, because you are taking characters who have been around for years, and have been developed over and over again, you basically had it served to you, and you still couldn't get the damn film right. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it.